in introducing Brendan, I should say we have shared a platform, I think 3 times now, and he is a most persuasive speaker. I should say that the background of my family is very deeply dyed Tory, but we haven't been in the Conservative Party for many years now. Indeed, back at the referendum of 1975, I was talking this over with my father, who said, "I don't like this Europe business. There's something about it that doesn't smell right." And then he paused and said, "But that man Wedgwood bends against it, so there must be some good in it." No, thank goodness we've overcome those sort of hang-ups. And of course we always have from the beginning been a cross-party organisation. Indeed, CIB was very much more Labour influenced in the early days because Labour was the party of independence and democratic government in those days. And some may remember, although I'm sure all far too young, that Enoch Powell urged people to vote Labour in 1983 because it would be better to have 4 or 5 years of Michael Foot than 1,000 years of the European Commission. Brendan is most persuasive. He has certain views which I entirely share on the customs union, and he also wants to point out, I think, the effect of Brexit in those constituencies where so many Labour supporters voted with confidence in their country and not for the Blairite vision. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Edward. Can I just apologise for being late to this meeting? We had a slight complication with trains coming in from Kent, but we're here now, so I do apologise. And it's a real pleasure, although I missed your speech, Stephen, to follow you on the platform this afternoon. I have shared a platform with both Edward and Stephen on a number of occasions, and each time their enthusiasm and commitment and passion for our cause, I think, strengthens and encourages us all to continue this fight. I'd like to thank Edward and the committee for the Campaign for an Independent Britain for their organisation of this afternoon's rally and for inviting me here to speak on behalf of the Labour and trade union members opposed to our membership of the European Union. The work of this campaign is vital to our ongoing struggle against membership of the European Union. It's unique in its ability to bring together the very broad church that is the Eurosceptic movement in this country, and I think it's particularly important at a time when there are powerful forces trying to overturn the result which we won a few years ago. So 2 years have passed since we voted to leave the European Union by a majority in a free and fair referendum. The day after our victory was confirmed, all of the main Leave campaigns, in error, disbanded, and they closed up shop. And I have to say, at the time, I believed this to be a huge mistake, and I believe it is still a mistake. And while we all celebrated that famous victory, the Remain side, although defeated, began to rally round and rebuild their campaign. And over the past few years, they have become very well organised and they are very well funded. And their efforts have not gone unnoticed. We've seen in the courts the various legal challenges by wealthy Remain supporting individuals, questioning the process by which we will leave the European Union. We've all had the Electoral Commission, that great unreformed institution coming after all Leave campaigners, playing rough, stalking us and making life difficult. The House of Commons would actually do very well to have them in before one of their committees and ask about their organisation and their leadership, because I think they're politically motivated. International businessmen, no names mentioned, are funneling hundreds of thousands of pounds into Open Britain. Former prime ministers and ministers on all sides are collaborating to undo Brexit. We've had the enormous delay in the invoking of Article 50, the process by which we actually leave the European state. And we've all seen with our own eyes the constant delay in the negotiations on the United Kingdom's future relationship with the European Union. And I don't seek to make a political point here, but we have in Theresa May a Prime Minister who is still unable to say that she supports Brexit in principle, whole and complete. Yet, despite these issues and complications, it now appears that the United Kingdom will formally leave the Treaty of the European Union, that founding treaty, the Treaty of Rome, next year, and this will demonstrate to the world that we have left the European Union. Now, some prominent Eurosceptics have suggested that this is the moment that will conclude the Brexit process. We will be in a position to embark on a new global journey outside the constraints of the European Union. But we must ask ourselves if this is really the case and fact. Later this year, there will be a meaningful vote in Parliament. It's not yet certain how this vote will unfold, or indeed what a meaningful vote actually is. I personally have no objection to a vote taking place in Parliament. It is the forum of the nation, and I trust that our honourable members of Parliament will respect the will of the people. There is, however, at present, no majority within the House of Commons for what they call a hard Brexit, or as I like to refer to it, what we all voted for. Labour, the party which I am proud to be a member, has said that it would like to have a, not the, a new customs union with the European Union. Labour has also set out 6 tests for Brexit and has made clear that it would not support the government if those tests are not satisfied. Some Tory MPs have suggested they may vote down the deal if it doesn't satisfy their belief in a complete Brexit. So on all sides of the chamber, there are members of Parliament vocally saying they could oppose Brexit. And a lot of them are actively campaigning to stop it happening altogether. Now, there are delicate policies that need to evolve in Northern Ireland, and the DUP must feel satisfied, as must we all, that Ulster is in no way treated or regarded as a separate entity outside of the sovereign territory of this country. The integrity of the United Kingdom must be maintained at all costs. And the process must also make its way through the House of Lords, which, as we all know, also has an overwhelming and enormous majority for staying in the single market and the customs union, and possibly the European Union as well. And through it all, we can expect more legal challenges and reviews from those well-funded instruments of Brussels. So the scene ahead of us is a bumpy one, and rather unclear. We do not yet know the outcome of the negotiations, and this week Michel Barnier intervened, suggesting the United Kingdom could change its mind on the single market after leaving the European Union. Now, while the government has said this is not a possibility, Barnier's intervention is very important because it does suggest that the negotiations are going to take a lot longer than the government expects. Therefore, that risk of a watering down of the deal, or further delays in outcomes, or a fudge deal, increases significantly. And these risks are not those just dreamt up by fringe Eurosceptics who cannot quite believe they have won and somehow believe the dark powers that exist will steal Brexit away. The risks are very real. Let us for a moment remember the treachery that has befallen our friends and comrades in the fishing industry. The nerve test of Brexit was that we would take back control of our territorial waters, restore our fishing fleets, and control our own fishing policy. Yet our fishermen have been betrayed and have been sold out by this government. And I think today we should send our solidarity with those, especially in Fishing for Leave, in their campaign, and all those in the industry who are working to save their industry from wreck and ruin, to provide jobs for the future and hope for the next generation. Well done to them for their ongoing struggle. So the conditions in Parliament that I've outlined and the betrayals we are witnessing, as well as the knowledge that we have on our opponents, as well as the weakness of this government, it should serve as a notice to us all that we have got a democratic duty and a national responsibility to continue campaigning until this deal is done. Now, those of us in the Labour and trade union movement who campaign to leave the European Union are doing our level best to hold the line against overwhelming odds in our movement. Let me just remind you that during the referendum there were 3 trade unions who supported leave. That was ASLEF, the RMT and the Bakers, Farmers and Agricultural Workers Union. They all supported a leave vote, and the Fire Brigade Union came within a whisker of supporting a leave vote, although the majority of their activists did vote leave. There were 700 Labour councillors who supported leave. There were 12 gallant members of Parliament who broke ranks and supported leave, and well done to them too for being so brave. And of course, there was a man who you all know, John Mills, Labour's biggest donor. He can't be here today, but he has asked me to pass on his best wishes and solidarity to you all today. Now, our campaign played an important role in demonstrating to Labour voters that they could be both Labour and Brexiteers, and that the two were not mutually exclusive. We have to remember, it was the Labour Party that was the original Eurosceptic movement in the United Kingdom. It was Clement Attlee in the 1945 Labour government who kept the United Kingdom out of the coal and steel community because the Durham miners wouldn't wear it. It was Hugh Gaitskell. Hugh Gaitskell, the Labour leader and former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who said at Labour conference that entry into the common market would mean the end of 1,000 years of history. And wasn't he right? It was the energies of Tony Benn in the Wilson government who forced a referendum after Edward Heath had taken us in, and it was Labour ministers in the form of Michael Foot, Barbara Castle and Tony Benn and Peter Shaw who led the No campaign in the last referendum. And in 1983, Labour's manifesto, some call it the longest suicide note in history, but it actually had a pledge in there to withdraw the United Kingdom from the EEC long before Margaret Thatcher had seen the light. But now the Labour Party is a very different party, in more ways than one. I'm not being disloyal in saying its membership, both at the grassroots and within Parliament, overwhelmingly backed Remain. A majority of the party would probably favour a soft Brexit, this phrase that means we should stay in the customs union and the single market, all the burdens, all the costs, all the regulations, with no influence. I'd also suggest that a large proportion of our membership would favour a second referendum, but the leadership, thankfully, have ruled this out. Indeed, Jeremy Corbyn sacked Owen Smith for supporting a second referendum not so long ago. In the past year, a number of campaigns have emerged within our movement. The Labour campaign for the single market, the Labour campaign for the customs union, the Labour campaign for free movement, and they are all placing enormous pressure on the leadership of the Labour Party to go down this soft Brexit route. Now, Labour, as you know, has 6 tests for Brexit, which this week was colourfully described by our Shadow Trade Secretary Barry Gardner as beyond credibility. These tests will be the basis upon which Labour will determine its support for the government's deal. But at the same time, Emily Thornberry, our Shadow Foreign Secretary, has hinted that Labour will support the deal. Now, if Tory rebels pair up with Labour MPs, it is conceivable that the government's deal could fall. Very conceivable. In these circumstances, it is unclear what might happen. A general election, second referendum, or another attempt at negotiations could indeed follow. Now, Labour has committed to remaining in a customs union with the European Union. Now, serious questions will arise if the government does not produce a customs arrangement with the European Union that would satisfy the Labour benches. But let's examine what a customs union actually does for products in this country, to the economies of developing countries, and to our own trade capabilities. The customs union removes the power from the elected British government to determine its own import duties and hands it to the unelected Commission. It prohibits the democratically elected United Kingdom government from being able to explore and construct its own trade deals with other countries, focusing our entire sphere on Europe instead of the wider world. The customs union places tariffs on goods produced in developing countries. For example, the big one we all know is coffee production. Tariffs are placed on refined but not non-refined coffee. This means developing nations are unable to grow their refining industries, while wealthy European countries can continue to benefit from the sale of that raw product once refined within the EU. This, in the words of Barbara Castle, means keeping once subjugated peoples under the yoke of Europe. It's contemptible and it's wrong. The tariffs mean that costs on products sold here in the United Kingdom are higher. Ordinary goods brought by you and I and everyone else are more expensive because of the European Union, which means the poorest in our society are hit hardest. It is therefore very curious why any political party or any movement would wish to remain in this anti-democratic, anti-internationalist and anti-socialist organisation, or indeed remain in any close association or affiliation with it. I hope that my party will rediscover its core roots on this issue. Britain is not just a European power, it is a global power with a combined historic, diplomatic, trading, military, cultural and linguistic and social reach that no other country on earth can match. And the sooner Labour embraces these ideals with arms open, outstretched, the closer the party will be to government and to being able to implement its radical and bold vision for Britain, which I am sure you all support. We have all travelled a long road together. Many of you in this room, and many beyond, have fought for many years at great professional and personal cost to achieve what we managed to achieve in June 2016. That early morning, when David Dimbleby announced that the United Kingdom would be leaving the European Union, will be a day I will never forget, and like all of you, it was probably the proudest moment of my life. However, we're not yet out of the woods. As I've remarked, powerful forces are operating now against the democratic will of the people. Every day, assaults are made against our economic confidence, against the people's will, against the legitimacy of the referendum, against those who campaign to leave, the organisations involved. We must remain cautious and vigilant and prepared at any moment to answer the call and campaign again for our national independence and our national sovereignty. And although we are leaving the European Union, we are not leaving Europe. Labour is an internationalist party at its core, and so should view this new relationship as a positive one, allowing us to be friends with Europe and with the rest of the world. True internationalism. Britain's future is outside the European Union. Our old friends and allies in the Commonwealth that we so wantonly abandoned are assembling to welcome us back into the great family of nations. And I'm looking forward to the day when people from the Commonwealth have exactly the same right to come to this country as people from the European Union. In this fight, we have been and remain the optimists and the progressives. We've been the visionaries who, through intellectual strength and imagination, have been able to conceive of the possibilities of what our nation can achieve outside the European Union. We've been on the right side of history, and generations to come will benefit from the enormous sacrifices and efforts we have all made. And we have declared ourselves ready and willing to campaign and to fight again if necessary to defend the democratic will of the people expressed in that famous referendum. Westminster and those who wield power in this country should pay close attention to the absolute and unwavering determination and focused will of the British people to see through to the end, and God help anyone who stands against that democratic will, for they will rue the day they do so. Indeed, as Brexit unfolds, Westminster should ensure that United Kingdom never again ceases to be a subjugated nation. I think that measures should be brought before Parliament through legislation or through other instruments and proclamations declaring the eternal and absolute independence and sovereignty of this country, so that never again our country will be swallowed into any future political arrangement or union. That should be fundamental to our country going ahead. And freedom must never be compromised, and democracy can never be for sale, regardless of the price or risk. And Britain, above all nations, has stood for freedom and democracy, and we will always do so. Hugh Gaitskell said, as I said earlier on, that entry into the European Economic Community would mean the end of 1,000 years of history. Now, as we leave the European Union, our history will be reborn again and anew. And the United Kingdom, independent, free, strong, let us all dream and hope now that for 1,000 years our country will be a peaceful one, a democratic one, a socially just one, and that hope for all mankind and free nations of the world. Thank you.